Then among the report's recommendations from this preliminary reading, the NPA has now tasked the NPA with looking at criminal charges to be brought possibly against Eskom executives, former Eskom executives Matshela, Koko and Anoj Singh, at least that's as far as their role in the sale of Optimum Coal Mine to the Gupta family. State capture whistleblower Bianca Goodson joins us now to talk about her not full reaction, because we are all, Bianca, still in the very early stages of making sense of this report. And from what we've seen so far, where you are concerned, the chairperson of the inquiry, Raymond Zondo, says that you were a credible witness. Do you feel vindicated?
It is. It certainly is. Because you go through all these processes where you sometimes think that you're going crazy and you're not sure if the information that you have to share is important. But to see the result, at least the recommendations so far coming out, that, you know, there's enough evidence to suggest that there are criminal charges that could be put forward against some people, that it is vindicating. You know, people did some bad things to this country, and they shouldn't get away with it scot-free.
The state capture allegations make up a long list. The inquiry sat for years. I'd like us to go back, please, to how you fit into the picture, because you were at Trillion, which then made headlines because there were massive amounts of money moving about, and in some cases your signature was used to move some of these funds, but you were not on board with the scheming. Tell us more about your involvement.
Yeah, so I was the CEO for Trillion's management consulting arm, so it was called Trillion Management Consulting. But I only stayed there for 3 months. I only worked for 3 months because within that period of 3 months, the way that the organization was conducting their business did disturb me and concerned me. So I got involved in the State Capture Commission because a year or so, 18 months after I'd left Trillion, I made my computer public and I voiced my concerns of what was happening at the organization. So I became a whistleblower. Yeah, so that's how I got involved. It was 3 months of my life that have subsequently changed, what is it now, 5 years of my life? Because after you become a whistleblower to something like state capture, your life never ever really quite go back to the way it was before. And
what is the quality of life of someone who was a whistleblower in a case as massive as what was going on at Trillion?
It's really, it's sad. The quality of life is sad. The degradation that I've experienced in what my life used to be like back in 2015 versus where it is right now. I mean, it's just cheese and chalk. So it's really horrible to effectively become unemployable. It's horrible to have to deal with the impacts of trauma that I had to go through. But particularly this being unemployable and having like this mark on your CV or your name where it's impossible to get back into the employment side is really difficult. And to also feel like a walking evidence docket is not great, because it feels like that's all that I've come down to at the moment. So hopefully, at least the effort would be worth something. In Eskom's case, it's great because at least McKinsey paid back $1 billion, I think. Trillion still owes 600 million, so at least that was also some vindication. But yeah, it's not quite fair to see how the people that orchestrated this situation, how their lives carry on, and the people that try to expose it end up in a worse off position.
So if you say you're unemployable now, what makes it worth it, having taken the risk?
I'm really hoping that when my daughter is my age, so in the next 30 years, she will be living in South Africa with a utility that is performing a lot better than Eskom is. So to sort of feel as though you're paying it forward and you're being patriotic to your country, that's definitely worth it, right? I believe that I was put in that position at a specific time because I had what it took to speak out and say no. And I didn't hear the consequences, as uncomfortable as they are at the moment. But it's worth doing because there are more good people in this country than there are bad.
And you're a professional person, as you say, at Trillion. You were in a senior role. You were CEO. You then came forward with information that was able to help an inquiry into government corruption, alleged and confirmed, whatever the title one wants to use. Why would other companies not want to hire you?
For that same reason. I don't know that there's any company that is completely squeaky clean, right? Everyone, I think, for the longevity of their company or the organization, I think everyone sort of sometimes maybe does take some corners, or they feel a bit insecure with maybe some of their governance processes. And so I suspect that having someone like me on board could induce fear, that I won't keep quiet if I see something that's wrong. That's the only thing I can think of. No one's ever really told me, this is what our fear is of you. I mean, there's been one company that says that they feared my public profile, so because I was Googleable. The only reason why you would fear something like that is that I would get attention if something's wrong. So I think that's what it is.
Have you given up any hope of finding work, at least in the South African job market?
I have, but I haven't stopped trying because, like I said, my family's here, my roots are here. I don't want to leave. So I still attempt. It's been unsuccessful, but I've certainly put a lot of hooks in the water abroad. But it will be with hesitation that I leave.
So, and let's talk about that then, because there's the ongoing call, isn't there, for those of us who are still in organizations to do as you did and speak out. But if what then is the result is punishment through not finding work, people not wanting to associate with you because, as you say, you're a little too Googleable for some of the corporates, why should anyone else do it?
Look, I mean, in the case of, for me, and when you look at other whistleblowers like Ethel Williams and Matshela, right? I mean, we did it because of our conscience, and we did it because we knew it was the right thing to do. So I think definitely people should do it. I do think that your values and your ethics should trump comfort, if that's my view. But being uncomfortable and not being able to necessarily support your young child is a problem, right? It is a problem. And I do think that it's only when speaking up becomes normalized in our society that it won't be shunned on. So it's one of these catch-22 situations where you actually need people to do it more for it to become what's expected and reasonable, in my opinion.
You mentioned your family. You mentioned a child. I'm not sure who else is part of your immediate family, but have they been directly impacted beyond you not being able to find work? How have they been impacted, and what's their feeling about the situation in which you find yourself today?
It's such mixed feelings. So my immediate family would be my parents, who are retired, and then my daughter was 10 years old. My father had to leverage his pension to financially support my daughter and I, so they've been directly impacted financially. Emotionally, my parents are completely drained. I think they've reached the point now where praying for me that things would change is just part and part. It's like breathing. It's all that they do these days. My daughter experienced trauma as well, and went through quite an emotional upheaval process, but she seems to be stabilizing now. And I'm in therapy every single week for at least the next 2 years, every single week. So it's had a profound impact on my family. But with that said, everyone in my family are very proud of me as well. So that's why I say it's a bit bittersweet, because there's this pride on the one hand, but there's the sense of hopelessness on the other, that the consequences of this action have been so severe.
As a point on which we can end, right, I know you had written quite publicly to the Eskom boss, Andre de Ruyter, about better treatment and opportunities for people who are whistleblowers. The president, Cyril Ramaphosa, has gone on record multiple times saying government needs to do better as far as the protection of whistleblowers and ensuring that they're not driven out of the country, as we've seen with others in the not too far past. If you could speak now directly, in fact, do speak directly to the president, the likes of Andre de Ruyter and the captains of industry who are in charge of companies that are not hiring people such as yourself, what would you say?
I do think that they need to lead by example, and they need to employ people with demonstrable integrity in their organization to become the leaders that drive the ethicism that they wish to see in their organizations. So for the president, I think that it's leaders like me and the whistleblowers like Ethel and Matshela that should actually be part of his advisors and leaders of some of our assets that we have within the country. The same with Mr. de Ruyter. And the likes of Transnet as well. If you had more people like me as part of your procurement processes, the 1064 transaction would have not happened. The billions of rands that we saw go over to Dubai through the money laundering activities of state capture would not have happened, because the procurement events would have been stopped or escalated at the time. So to change the culture of our public service, we need the right types of people, not just in terms of skills, but also just in terms of morals, values, and ethics. And that's where I think our leaders need to start installing more leaders. And then in addition to that, they should really consider something that mitigates the stigma associated with whistleblowing. And if there's any way, not necessarily to incentivize it in terms of financial reward, but certainly to lessen the brunt of the stigma attached to whistleblowing. I don't know what the answer is exactly, but if that can be considered, that would really go for in my opinion, it would change our society and the moral fiber of our society.
Bianca Goodson, so good to speak to you.